I agree with you that government should be looking at policies instead of being involved in industry and everything. It doesn't work. And it's about time Ghana realizes that it's not going to work for government to be involved in setting up companies and all those things. It doesn't work. Government should be contained with policies, and then private sector should be involved in setting up industries and everything. It works that way, and therefore you can attract more investment to come to the country, and it creates more employment. DRA and others, our government establishment, let's give it out and divest to public sector, private sector, and then we inject money in that. And get the right people to do it. GRIDCo and others and all are all for private sector. Let's give them the money, get the qualified people, divest government from it, and let them do it. Other than that, electricity company is in a situation where we don't know, but that also must be divested and give it to private sector. Why are we still holding it when we don't have the money? We are not even able to collect all the taxes that we want. We are going to IMF for money and all those things. We are hanging on to industries that we cannot maintain and run. Look, it's about time we face realities and then decided on what government should be doing and what private sector should be doing. This is a testimony of private sector. And they were able to attract Oppenheimer. His family has all the money in South Africa. They were able to attract him to come here because he believed in private sector. And they've done it in various countries in Africa. So that is how we have to be looking at it, to attract more of these investments into the private sector so we can do it. My son here, when he was, Nanyampo was saying that those small generators and all those are given to Bui and all those things. Go and review the policy and let the government know how to go about it.
Hello, welcome back to the AM show. As you've heard the Asanteni Otumfuo say to stroking some controversy there as he's urging governments to leave entities in the energy value chain, that is VRA, GRIDCo and ECG, to private sector investment, since the government doesn't have the financial muscle to sustain them. But is privatization the way to go? I mean, we've seen this before with PDS that had to be suspended because of allegations of fraud. What has been the effect of these early attempts to privatize them? We'll interrogate this right now on the AM show. My guest joining me is Dr. Steve Manteo. He's a policy analyst with the Integrated Social Development Center. And Mr. Michael Nyantechi is also joining me, General Secretary of the Public Utilities Workers Union. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning. Yeah, good morning.
Great, good. So let me start with you. Is that Dr. Steve Manteo?
Yeah,
Great.
yes.
Okay, great.
A small correction. I'm not with the Integrated Social Development Center. I used to be.
Okay.
But I'm no more with them.
Thanks for that correction. But I want to start by taking your reaction to these things that the Otumfuo Setutu has been saying. How do you react to this? What are your initial thoughts?
Well, the call calls for a reflection because a lot of the times when we talk about privatization, there seems to be only one type of privatization that comes to mind, which provides opportunities for rent seeking, as we saw in the case of PDS. But there are other types of privatization that work and have worked for this country. Let me say that the reason I will support Otumfuo's call is that we are where we are today because of excessive politicization of the energy sector. And you see this play out in the way ECG has responded to calls for load shedding schedule. If ECG should respond to that call positively, it would mean an admission of the fact that we are in doomsday, which then hands over a certain political advantage or equalization to the opposition party, because this current government has played politics with the sector and had not recently indicated that he leaves the legacy of doomsday to Mahama and that there will be no DUMSO under his reign. Now, how does the ECG managing director, who is appointed by the president, turn around to act in ways that admit that there is DUMSO, or at least openly admit that there is DUMSO? And therefore, we as the shareholders of the company are being told the entire truth about where we are and why we are here. But recent interrogations of this matter by Parliament has revealed that indeed we have a generation gap, largely as a result of the inability to raise enough funds to procure fuel. And this takes us to the point of a deja vu. In 2015, the World Bank cautioned us, it was actually in 2014, cautioned us of an imminent DUMSO because of government's inability to raise funds to procure fuel. And we got into it. And we are here again. It therefore beggars the question as to how we finance our electricity company. I must admit that the current management of ECG has done a great deal of work for which they deserve to be commended in terms of mobilizing revenue to pay for the electricity supply to them. First and foremost, we saw the establishment of a revenue task force by the managing director, which exhibited some boldness in terms of targeting the big state institutions that owed the most to the ECG, including the airport company, Parliament and other big institutions. And they were able to mobilize some money. They've also digitalized their systems because there was a lot of corruption with the connivance of ECG staff. They've also dealt with the meter shortages in the country and also the lack of standardization of these meters, which actually also provided opportunity for rent seeking. 6 companies have been shortlisted to assemble the meters here in Ghana. And ECG doesn't have to pay for it outright. The cost of these meters supplied by these companies are to be recovered over time. So these are all initiatives that bodes well for the sector. But you ask yourself, why is it that after doing all these remarkable things, the ECG managing director stands vilified because he has not been able to openly admit that there is DUMSO?
Okay.
This is because of the politics that we play with the sector.
All right, Dr. Manthio, please hold for me. Those are very insightful thoughts there. But let me now bring in Justice Kojo Yaoche, who is with Africa Center for Energy Policy. You've been following the conversation, Justice Yaoche. How do you react at this point based on what Otumfuo has been saying and what Dr. Manthio has also been saying, calling for the privatization of ECG particularly?
All right, thanks for having me. I think the name should just stay as Kojo Yaoche for now. I think it's good we are having this conversation. It is something that we have spoken about at ASEP for quite a long time now, that our inability, and like Dr. Manthio mentioned, our inability to separate the politics from the technical management of the sector is our own undoing. And it's been the reason why we are facing some of the challenges that we are facing. The strategy that we've had allowing ECG to reform itself has not worked. And what we see is that you have a government-owned entity that is generating a lot of inefficiency, both commercially and technical inefficiencies that are priced into our tariffs that we pay. And there are no significant attempts until recent times when the economic regulator has decided to crack its whip to get the business to be running as a commercial entity. And if you have a utility that is making losses up to 40% on the power that you give it, that business, no private person will run their business in that manner that year on year, the losses keep on increasing. That's notwithstanding the fact that tariffs have also been increasing. You expect that with tariff increasing, there will be a lot of revenue within the system to take care of some of these issues. But the PLC reports rather suggest that whilst tariffs are increasing, debt continues to be accumulated within the space. So it is good that we are having this conversation to try and see how we can find sustainable reforms. It's just that we have to be cautious what form of privatization that we want to explore. There are different models that are available to be explored. We still believe that ECG is still a strategic asset to the state. So we should be considering the last mile metering and revenue collection. How do we involve the private sector, genuine private sector capital, to be able to transform those spaces, because the technology exists to be able to detect people who are stealing power. The technology is available to detect faulty meters that are leaking power. All of those things are there, but you need that management of the space away from government hands so that the PULC, which is government regulator, can effectively regulate it. If you look at the recent stance against from ECG against the PULC, bring these documents, they will not bring it. The share load management schedule, they will not do it. If it were to be a private business, they wouldn't behave like this towards their regulator. But because they are all government entities, ECG feels, well, my board and my boss is appointed by the government, the state, even though the regulator has institutional representation, they have to also be appointed by the government, the president. So they feel that they are equal partners in the business and one doesn't have to report to the other. We need to find a way to delink the business of running business entities and also regulating those entities within the space.
All right, I'll come back to you. I mean, because we've done this before, looking at PDAs, and the case is still being arbitrated in the United States. But because you're speaking specifically to the ECG, I want to now bring in Michael Nyantechi, who is the General Secretary of the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission with the ECG. Michael Nyantechi, so both Dr. Manthi and Justice Yaoche are saying that indeed they agree with what Otumfuo has been saying, just that there are some dynamics that we should look at carefully. How does this really sit with you?
I think, as Dr. Manthi mentioned, this is virtually a path we have gone over, and now we are back again to this same issue. And I think from where we are sitting as a union, and I'm not with the Public Utility Regulation.
Right, you're with the Public Utilities Workers Union. Right.
Yes.
My bad.
So we have always maintained that the answer to the challenges that we are facing in the energy sector is not just by simply handing over the institution to a private sector operator. We believe that there are key challenges in the system. And I think Dr. Manthi mentioned some, and then the last speaker has also mentioned some. And for us, the major issue we find with almost all the state institutions is the excessive political interference. If we are able to deal with that, I strongly believe that there are very qualified professionals in all these energy institutions, if given the free hand without any political maneuvering, will be able to do a professional job that will not bring us into where we are at the moment. And I always cite the example. Everybody who followed up, even though we strongly think against handing over the company to private sector participation and PDS was brought in, within about 6-7 months that PDS was in operation, because the hand of government had virtually been lifted or limited, PDS operation in terms of day-to-day running and managing of the company, there were, everybody could see clear changes and transformations. And this was not because they brought in any experts from anywhere. It was basically the same staff working. But at that point in time, the excessive political interference was curtailed. The problem we have when the issue of political interference, privatization is raised, it's like as if we are trying to throw the bath water with the baby. And we think that the solution is just giving the company to private sector access. It is not a panacea. And if you want to find out why just handing over the company to private ownership or private entities will not solve the problem, don't go far. Just go to our neighboring country, our neighbor Nigeria. Nigeria liberalized and then handed the company over to private ownership. But the problems they are having in their energy sector is even worse. If we want to address the problems within the energy sector, we should be ready to divert the politics from the day-to-day operations of the company. And then also, sometimes when we talk about the private sector participation, we only assume that it is when the company is owned by private entities, then we are talking about. Currently, if you look at the interventions that the new ECG management has brought in place, there is significant participation by the private sector. And that has culminated in some of the changes that we have seen. But unfortunately, the major problem of the political interference is still there. So that problem has not been resolved. So if we want to get a proper solution, we need to look at it from that angle. We should get either some arrangement where the board of the company, the appointment of a chief executive is not based or left in the hands of any political authority. And then we can get the institutions to run and operate professionally. There are examples across the globe where state-owned entities are run professionally, devoid of political or partisan consideration.
Right.
And we believe that that is where we have to be looking at.
Okay. Dr. Mantiao, I want to bring you back into the conversation because, well, like the Otumfuo said, our issue is money. You mentioned politicization, but there are certain learnings from our previous engagements with PDS that should teach us something going forward. So my question to you is, how do we reconcile the learnings? Because power is... Please hold for me. Let me finish my question. Hello? So electricity is a basic utility. If we hand it over to private investors, profiteering comes to play. So how do we reconcile these two issues and ensure that we are finding ways to solve our problems of money, politicization, and at the same time doing what's best so that everyone in this country can have power?
Right, thank you. We often tend to think narrowly that money rests with only private, individual, or corporate entities. We've been here before. I recall somewhere in 2006, as a result of excessive governmental interference in the affairs of the Ghana Commercial Bank, where they were directed as to whom to give loans to. You recall there was a scandal involving the Ahoy brothers and some monies they took from the bank. There was also the issue of overexposure to the Tema oil refinery. All of it worked to bring the bank to its knees. Government thought it needed money to invest in the bank and to save the bank from collapse. And its strategy was to hand over the assets of Ghana Commercial Bank to a strategic investor, at least 70% of it. Some of us organized and protested and campaigned against that move. In the end, I recall the finance minister then was Honorable Otumfuo, and he challenged us, the CSOs, to give an alternative to what government had proposed. And we proposed the stock exchange as the alternative for raising the required funding. Government listened, and I give the Otumfuo's government the credit. And they went to the stock exchange. And the shares that they took to the stock exchange, 70%, was oversubscribed, meaning government got much more money than it needed. Same happened with GOIL. At the time when GOIL was on his knees, government had to go to the stock exchange and was able to raise more than it needed to save GOIL from collapse. It happened also with SIC. So we've done it before, and there's a template to follow. So if you talk about learnings, these are the learnings, the positive learnings that I would like to firmly place on the table. The negative learnings will be at a time when we were facing similar crisis in the water sector. We brought Akufo-Addo round under a management contract to salvage the situation. After 5 years of operating Ghana Water Company, services deteriorated, and those were the years we saw the Akufo gallons. So they could not salvage the situation, and we had to refuse to renew their contract after the initial 5-year phase. And then we handed over Ghana Water to Ghanaians, and then services began to improve. Mr. Nantechi is right. Ghanaian, and I believe in the competence of the Ghanaian manager and its ability to deliver if you take away the political interferences, often to achieve narrow political ends. So if this country can find a way of insulating strategic national assets that I think at all costs, this country must hold sway in, and that will include water, electricity, and the financial and the telecom sector, to the extent that the government holds a majority stake, we should find a way to insulate them from political interferences. And I'm pretty sure these companies will deliver. We have a similar situation in GNPC, where in spite of the fact that we knew there was a very competent person, Mr. Joseph Dazi, to run the affairs of the company, because he was not well connected politically, he was sidestepped and the position was handed over to a relative of people in the current government. After a while, we saw fast deterioration in the fortunes of GNPC. And now we have had to go back to bring Mr. Joseph Dazi to undo the downward trend in the affairs of GNPC.
Right.
So clearly, I mean, the lessons are quite abundant that political interference is what we need to deal with in trying to salvage the situation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mantiao. But Benjamin is standing by in the studio. Ben, you've been following the conversation so far. What are your thoughts?
It's been interesting, and Dr. Steve Mantiao paints a certain picture about, yes, privatizing locally maybe, but ensuring that Ghanaian managers with the wherewithal can get there. But that is where the devil is, really, in the detail, because he also talks about political elements and how we've seen them heading institutions. Sometimes you have square pegs and round holes. But let's now bring in as well founding president of Imani Africa, Franklin Cudjoe. He joins the conversation now. Mr. Cudjoe, good morning.
Good morning, my brother. How are you?
I am well. I hope you're well too.
I could be better, thank you.
All of us could be better. But speaking of this, power situation and everything in between, first off, let me find out from you. I hope your power hasn't been out in very recent times, even before we get to the substantive.
It's been doing the dance like the Phantasmagoria. What's it called? Disco lights. I slept in darkness for almost 11 hours 3 days ago.
Wow.
And it wasn't pretty. Yeah. I mean, I'm surprised that the people are quibbling over the terminology of them. So isn't it stupid, really, to think that when the lights go off for a very long time and it comes back, you can't describe it as doom so, or you should be describing it as some sort of fanfare. I can't believe this, really. And I'm surprised that we have allowed ourselves to be basically taken for a ride by the energy minister, who has never had the penchant to even apologize for those awkward statements he made, that everybody should go and look for his own or timetable. How silly, how asinine, this morning.
It appears you are charged up, you are fired up this morning. I'm
just angry. I'm just angry. You know, it's not fair. We shouldn't be doing these things to ourselves. I mean, people can decide to be arrogant and dismissive of what happens in public discourse, but you cannot take everybody for a fool, really. And I'm surprised that the minister has not been asked to apologize. Indeed, he's never even... I hear he's even saying that you say the same thing again if he had a chance, really.
Well,
anyway.
Let's come to the substantive issue then. Yesterday at the commissioning of the Kumasi thermal plant, the Kumasi 1 thermal plant, formerly Ameri, because it's practically the same thing, the Asante-Hene actually came forth with something curious, suggesting privatizing the ECG and some other entities, including GRIDCo. Now, there have been different schools of thought on that. Dr. Mantiao was just saying privatizing is not necessarily bad, but are we going to have local managers? Is it going to be a local privatization? What's your take?
Well, good morning, Steve. First of all, I mean, I don't even know why we are struggling to understand that the types of privatization that occurs in this part of our world are chronic capitalist arrangements. Yes, Munchendi type of arrangement. We've never really given privatization its clearest and fair name. That's not to say that even in places where privatization occurs correctly, there are no shenanigans. There are. But what occurs in this part of our world are chronic capitalist arrangements. The last time we decided to have private participation in our electricity supply system, look at how it ended. It ended because certain people...
Are you referencing the PDS? Are you referencing PDS?
The PDS. Okay. Clumsy. It was totally clumsy. To think that the Americans were willing to give us money so that we would do things right, we messed it up because of partisan, not partisan politics. That's coarseness, what I call precocious, terrorism, really. Financial terrorism was what led to all the PDS process to falter. So I understand Steve when he talks about the fact that, look, it's not really about the what's it called? It's not that we don't have world-class managers in this part of the world. We do have it, and we should do a proper blend. But that's not to give a privatization a bad name because we don't do it right. So what Asante-Hene is saying is not really new. I mean, you Benjamin, you know pretty well that what the Asante-Hene was saying was not really new. In fact, if we had been doing the right things, would have probably privatized almost even water itself. I know Steve would be shaking his head. But people assume that water cannot be privatized when our struggling folks are buying water 3 times, 4 times the normal price that even the rich will buy. So there's already privatization going on for some of these services. Why pretend that it cannot be done? We're only pretending because when we do start the process, you see all kinds of, octopus-like behavior. People trying to cream up where they are not supposed to do, right from procurement all the way until the whole process is divested. So that's exactly what is plaguing us. It's not that we can't do it. Look at ECG. Even the procuring of meters has become something like it's become fetish.
So I get your point. It can be done. I mean, no one has suggested that it can't be done. It can be done, but you look at the timing. You look at the economic situation. And you also look at the viability of our economy. The telcos are by and large in foreign hands, services in this country. Some have said, you go this way with our power and likely water, then nothing. The levers of our economy are all in the hands of private enterprise, whether local or foreign. That is dangerous for national security.
Benjamin, I don't even understand the conversation about timing at all. In economics, you actually deal with economics of scale. If I'm making an investment in an enterprise, I'll be wise enough to understand what plagues the industry currently or whatever I'm buying, and look at have conversations with the shareholders, and we come to a common ground. If it is the case that we can't trust our leaders to negotiate properly, let's say so. But we cannot suggest that if I want to buy ECG, for instance, I shouldn't be careful about it or its assets and liabilities. I'll do so and offer a price that will be fair. If the price is not light, then you reject it. And I don't think only Ghanaian leadership should be allowed to take that decision. That's the only way we can cure this. It has not. In fact, it is when the economy is actually precarious that you actually should be divesting, so that you don't spend government money going to subsidize these entities any longer. Have you seen the books of some of the SOEs? You'll cry. And Steve knows truly well that what I'm saying is true. It has nothing to do with the color of the person or the color of the times. It has everything to do with economics and economics of scale. If I can make a profit, why not? But I don't have to care too much about whether the entity belongs to the so-called strategic assets, they call them. What have they retained? What strategy have they retained when we needed that much?
So merely because they have failed in doing that, we should let go of them?
It's not because they have merely failed. They perennially have been failing. So it has nothing to do with whether they are in the hands of the state or in the hands of the private person. I'm saying that it would be better to divert some of these resources that are wasting and wasteful, that we are always subsidizing, by giving them away to competent hands that will discuss the value in return.
Are you taking note of what the cost factors could be? Looking at what we are paying now for electricity and water, if we hand it over to private enterprise, Sweetie Awachi, my colleague, was talking about profiteering earlier. Things could become even more dire for the ordinary man or woman trying to purchase electricity, and who knows, maybe in future water. Have you put that into perspective?
Well, Benjamin, two things. First of all, let's not deride profiteering. It's from profit that you invest and then scale. That's the way it is. If you decide that you want to run a state utility on the whims of socialist ideas or communist ideas, well, so do so. Then find money to continuously feed the pledge. But if you want to do so and return a profit that would then encourage what I call differential pricing, then maybe you should do that. And I think even for crying out loud, even for private actors, they are mindful of what they call differential pricing. That's why MTN is able to give all manner of offers to certain categories of persons, because they know that all the pockets, all the hands are not the same. Mm-hmm. We can do all of these without necessarily bastardizing privatization. And once again, the kinds of privatization that have occurred in this part of our world are chronic capitalist ones with state actors, politically exposed persons trying to milk the entire system. That is not privatization. It is not. And we cannot say that because we are in economic difficulty, which was not caused by private actors by them, it was caused by the same people we are expecting them to manage on our behalf. That was the point, really. Why not give it to somebody who will be doing it properly and returning the value? Companies have been here since time. Didn't MTN start as Scancom? Why have they evolved? They've evolved all these years and are doing well. How much taxes do they pay? They pay so much and still find money to do other corporate social responsibility activities. Of course, the state cannot be the same as a corporate entity, but at least, if you want to give your money to a politician to manage your life for you, you better be sure that he's able to return some real value and not see that as an avenue to not just milk the system, but actually make it worse as well.
Right before I go back to Sweetie Abochi, just a quick thought, Franklin Kujo. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how supportive are you of what the Asantehene said? I don't know whether you're thinking local privatization or foreign privatization, but on a scale of 1 to 10, how supportive are you of that? And then Sweetie Abochi.
Well, I'm 100% supportive, but let me also add that when Asantehene talks about that and talks about local participation, it is possible, but we shouldn't go the way of South Africa. That decided to do what they call the black enterprise. I forgot to be messed it up, and only a few blacks actually enjoyed what's it called, on the blank side of millions of blacks, which is why the politics of South Africa is in a mess today.
Right. Benjamin, it appears one thing runs through all these thoughts that are coming up, that we shouldn't hand over everything to private investment.
We probably should have a stake.
Yes, some parts of it, because we need money. And if the government cannot provide that money that we need, we should allow investors to come in and take over that. But I want to bring back Justice Yahache, because he was making a point about being cautious, and then he started listing so let me ask, where do we draw the line? How much of ECG, GRIDCo can we give to private investment, and what part of it can we retain? Justice Yahache, yeah.
So the point I was making, I think Franklin touched on that point very well about the kind of privatization that we've been having here. It's not just saying that we should privatize the company, but what kind of people are we giving the company to? Are we looking for genuine capital, or we are looking for posers who are politically exposed people, have no capacity to do anything, and then we hand it over to them just to milk the states? That is not what we are looking for. With lessons that we've learned from the past, we have suggested that we can face the privatization of the company, looking at how we can hand over some of the technical management and the operational management to private people. It could be local, it could be foreign, and then at some point, like Steve also suggested, list it on the stock exchange. The whole idea is to take away the management of the company away from the politics that is bedeviling it. Because it's because of the politics that decisions that they have to take to be able to ensure that the right things are done, they are not able to do it. And we can't continue with the same way, we are doing the business. If you look at every year, the power sector alone is costing us $1.5 billion in under recoveries alone that the government has to come in to assume liability for. So even if you give the whole $3 billion that we are supposed to get from the IMF deal to the power sector, it can't even cover for 2 years the liabilities that are accruing from there. So the time is now that we need to have really serious conversations about it. The models for the privatization are numerous. They've worked elsewhere. But what we should guard against is posers, fraudulent people, politically exposed fraudulent people who would want to hijack that process. That process has to be transparent to ensure that we are able to know who owns the beneficial owners of all of these companies that would want to come and take over some portion of the management of the company. We are able to know their technical and financial capacity, not companies that are registered 2-3 months when the deal is announced, like we are seeing in TOR, for example. If you see the companies that have lined up that they want to take over the management of TOR, and we have come to speak against it, that's not how you do the business.
Right.
Competent businesses that can take over the management of these entities and make returns and value for the people. And you have the economic regulator that is on standby to ensure that the people are not shortchanged in terms of the cost burden on them and also the quality of service that is delivered to them.
Thank you so much, Kojo Yawache. But I want to come back to Dr. Manteau for your final words. And just leading with this question, do you think that this would actually happen? Do you think that government will actually agree for private investment into this power sector? Dr. Manteau, if you're still with me, please. And then you can wrap it up for us.
No, not at this time, because, we are in an election year. And even if government were to begin the process, chances are that they will not be able to conclude it before the elections. And we're not too sure whether a future government other than the MPP will be committed to what the MPP may have started. We know the nature of our political settlement in this country. So this is something, the discussion is helpful because it gets the political parties to begin to reflect, even as they develop their party manifestos, and to propose solutions if they should win political power. And that should guide most of us voters on how we vote. But as a general caution, I would say that we need to, as a country, make a distinction between strategic sectors of the economy and non-strategic sectors of the economy, and to be able to be mindful not to hand over the strategic sectors of the economy to foreigners.
Right. Thank you so much.
Just last word there. Strategic sectors of the economy, such as finance, water, electricity, and even I dare add telecommunication, must be controlled by Ghanaians. Because, these are all belong to a service sector. And the service sector, because they are not producing tangibles that can be exported, you don't generate revenue from exports to shore up your city. But rather, because most of the revenue in the sector are generated in cities by foreigners, they then convert your cities into dollars. This is your oil, cocoa, gold, dollars that you brought in. They convert the cities they've earned by providing services and ship them out of the country. So your local currency is always wobbling. And that is why we should be careful in handing over some of these sectors to foreigners.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Steve Manteau. Michael Anyantechi, let me let you have the final say here, and then we can wrap up. If you're still with me, what are your final thoughts?
Yeah, so just as Dr. Manteau mentioned earlier, I think that nobody can run away from the fact that, yes, there's the need for capital injection. But then the source of capital is varied. And we must always look at the source of capital that will not bring some adverse or more severe consequences. If you go in for foreign investing, basically we should know that at the end of the day, we are also going to experience the challenges with capital flight. So if there is the option where we can raise capital from within the country, and just like the examples you mentioned, the stock exchange is one. Currently, we have also the various pension funds. If it's properly regulated and channeled, I'm sure the funds from the pension body can be also a source of financing once we make sure that the big hand of government or politics is taken away from the institution. We have more than technical, competent, experienced people within the country. The only problem we are having is that the institutions are too much politically sensitive and so much burdened with political interference. If we take it away and we allow the organizations to run on pure business principles and private sector business ethos, we can get the institutions which are so sensitive, like our energy sector, the financial institutions you mentioned,
right,
function, and that will give more benefits to the state than handing them over to profiteers and especially private foreign investors.
Okay. Thank you so much. That was Michael Nyantechi, the General Secretary for Public Utilities Workers Union. We also spoke to Kojo Yawache, Policy Lead for Petroleum and Conventional Energy at ASEP, and Dr. Steve Manteau, the co-chair for Ghana Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative. And then Franklin Kujo joined us, president of Imani Africa. Benjamin, it's interesting that nobody is opposed to the idea of privatization. And specifically, the Otumfuo spoke about supply and distribution. Issue of management has also come up. So where do we go from here?
I mean, I side more with what Dr. Steve Manteau said. It resonates more with me. No one is against privatization. Yeah. But like I have said, and it is interesting that Dr. Manteau is thinking along the same lines. Even our telco system, the services are in the hands of foreigners. It's a dangerous thing for national security. Now, he makes the point that, yeah, local to some extent, but he's also talking about capital flight, especially when you have the foreign entities come in. Because, yes, there'll always be pressure on your local currency, and the cedi hasn't fared so well against the dollar. This year, between 8.5 and 11% shaved off in terms of the losses. So if this continues, and then you have another PDS-like entity come into the system, they are going to change your cedis into dollars, put more pressure on the dollars you have, capital flight. It may not be the best of situations. Plus, again, with the PDSs and the rest, it's not even about, like he said, maybe the stock exchange. But when you want to go down that road of maybe having entities come in, then you have the problem of people in power trying to front. They are beneficiary owners. They are behind the scenes. You don't know them. And they are the same people buying state entities. That becomes even more dangerous for our political landscape.
If you ask me, quoting someone, if the foundation is weak, the economy will expose you. All these issues coming up is our economy.
The fundamentals,
The fundamentals of our economy. Our cedi is just not doing well. And if we can fix it, all these issues would go away. But that's how we are wrapping up for this belt of the conversation. We're not done. There's still more to come on the AM show. Keep watching.
Of these projects.